please call the roll.
Bertschiger, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Prozonsky, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, President Cordy.
Being present, we will post the colors. Now, today our posting will be a little different. The colors will be presented by members of the Portland Fire and Rescue Honor Guard. They are Chris Barnard, Jim Martin, David Paul, Jeff Tochney, and Travis Powell. Now, they will come forward to the front of the chambers, where they will stand, and Travis Powell will sing the national anthem. Following the national anthem, in a traditional way, they will then come forward and post the colors in their regular stands up here at the podium. I will lead then with the Pledge of Allegiance. This flag ceremony will be accompanied by pipes and drums played by members of the Salem, Clackamas, Tualatin Valley, Eugene, and Tangent Fire Departments. We will now post the colors. By the rope up.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Rope up.
Let us take a moment to honor the selfless sacrifices of our brave firefighters who risked their lives and who have given their lives in service to all of us, all our fellow Oregonians. That was very good. I thank you, Portland Fire and Rescue Honor Guard. Thank you, Travis Powell, for your rendition of the national anthem. And I thank those who played the pipes and the drums from the Salem, Clackamas, Tualatin Valley, Eugene, and Tangent fire departments for this opening ceremony, as the Oregon State Senate has just posted the colors to recognize the extraordinary contributions by our firefighters made every day, 24/7, throughout the great state of Oregon to take care of us and to protect us and our loved ones. Honorary pages. Maya Bruner is an honorary page of Senator Michael Dembro. Madeline Gregg is an honorary page for the Senator Ted Ferrioli. Katie Shealy is the honorary page from the guest of Senator Jeff Cruz. I'd like to thank the honorary pages. Of course, they're on the floor, as they are every day, to help us get through our floor sessions as well as our work throughout the day, both in our offices as well as in our committees. And I hope today, when it is over, these honorary pages will have a memory that will last them a lifetime. It's always an honor and privilege that we get to enjoy you, and we're glad you've come to help us get through our work for the people of Oregon. Visiting the Capitol today are students from the Gupser Elementary School in Kaiser, school I'm very familiar with. Students from the Santiam Elementary School in Mill City. I don't sense they're in the galleries, but they're here somewhere, and would like to welcome them to their state capitol, and we hope the word reaches them that we're extending the courtesies of the Senate to them at this time. Under courtesies, recognize Senator Bill Hansel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to add a little bit on to your courtesies, today is Fire Service Day in the Capitol. It was on this day in 1935 that our previous Capitol was destroyed by fire. It seems appropriate that members of the Fire Service are joining us today. In the gallery, we have members of the Oregon Fire District Directors Association, the Oregon Fire Chiefs Association, the Oregon Volunteer Firefighters Association, and others who represent fire services across the state. Please join me in welcoming them and extending courtesies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Again, as we did in the opening ceremony, set aside a special moment for the men and women who are in our fire service. Again, let me recognize each and every one of you to the extent that you're in the Capitol or wherever you are in the state of Oregon. This is your day, and therefore it's Oregon's day. We're better and safer for your work. We cannot thank you enough. And I appreciate the fact that we set aside a special day to honor you and just you and your families and your loved ones. Recognize Senator Ted Ferrioli.
Oh, Mr. President, thank you so much for the courtesies to our page. Madeline Rihanna Gregg from South Wasco County Junior High. You've already mentioned her name. I just wanted people to know that she's involved in mathematics, U.S. and world history, art. She is the junior high ASB president. She's on the student council. She is involved in volleyball, track, and ski racing. Colleagues, I regularly take the opportunity to meet with our pages and tell them that many of you were pages when you were their age. And I entrap them into the idea that the only difference between people who serve in this room and those who do not is the desire to do so, and that they've already self-selected by being here as pages. So I hope you'll all encourage the pages to become our public elected officials and leaders in their communities, because they're self-selecting. Mr. President, thank you for your courtesies to Madeline Rihanna Gregg from South Wasco County Junior High.
Recognize Senator Chuck Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, please extend courtesies to a friend of mine from Boring, Oregon, Steve Bates. He's here today representing the one remaining family member of Norman Francis Evans, who we are honoring today in SCR 19. Thank you, Mr. President.
Steve, welcome here, and I hope that you're having a good day, and I hope you'll stay throughout the day. And you're sitting by a very good person. You got a very good friend there, and so it's an honor and a privilege to have you here. Thank you. We'll now go to remonstrances. Are there any? Senator Alan Olson, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, on your desk is a document that I put out there. This weekend was the March for Science, and in this article it says the Arctic Ocean is warming, icebergs are growing scarcer, and in some places the seals are finding the water too hot. Soundings to a depth of 3,100 meters showed the Gulf Stream still very warm, and I'm not reading the whole thing, so I would appreciate it if you did. Within a few years, it is predicted that due to the ice melt, the sea will rise and make coastal cities uninhabitable. Colleagues, I forgot to mention that this was reported November 2nd, 1922, as reported by the AP and published in the Washington Post nearly 95 years ago. So science proves itself. We are a cyclical Earth.
Message from the House.
Mr. President, the House has passed House Bill 3060, 2039, 3409, 2162, 2567, 2682, 2975, 3305, 3389, 2785, 2838, 2968, 3158, 3181, 3353, 3377, 3439, and adopted House Concurrent Resolution 27 and 29.
Reports from committees in accordance with SR 8.551. Committee report summary number 101 was distributed to members April 24th, and number 102 was distributed today. This information will be recorded in the Journal and States report is so ordered. Proposition and motion. Recognize Senator Jenny Burdick, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that SCR 19 be taken from its place on today's calendar and be placed on the Wednesday, April 26th calendar.
Senator Jenny Burdick has moved that the SCR 19 be taken from its place on today's calendar and be placed on Wednesday's April 26th calendar. Your motion, please explain.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a better day for those who would like to watch our debate on this.
The motion is to take SCR 19 from today's calendar and place it on Wednesday, April 26th calendar. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed, no. This motion is carried. Recognize Senator Jenny Burdick, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that final consideration of SB 762 be made a special order of business immediately.
Senator Jenny Burdick has moved that the final consideration of SB 762 be made a special order of business immediately. To your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill deserves the recognition of being first.
Discussion? Those in favor of taking up Senate bill immediately and making a special order of business will please say aye. 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 All those opposed? This motion has carried. We will now proceed to the special order of business. This clerk will please read the bill.
Senate Bill 762, relating to immunity from prosecution.
Recognize Senator Sarah Gelser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm very pleased to stand today in favor of Senate Bill 762. About half of all sexual assault survivors in college report that they were drinking alcohol at the time of the assault. And while many students under the age of 21 have this experience, less than 10% of sexual assaults on college campuses are reported. This is because there's a tremendous fear of being cited for minor in possession. This is true for bystanders as well, who may be witnessing an assault taking place, but may be fearful about contacting law enforcement lest somebody face a minor in possession charge. It's absolutely critical that victims of sexual assault receive the intervention and support that they need. No one ever deserves to be the victim of sexual assault, and the delivery of those services, the interruption of that assault must always take the priority over a small charge like minor in possession. Senate Bill 762 will make it possible for people under the age of 21 to have the confidence that they can contact law enforcement, ensure that these services are delivered as needed to the victim, and that they do not have to worry about a minor in possession because they are doing the right thing to protect another person. I urge your vote. Thank you.
We're now under discussion, and I recognize Senator Elizabeth, excuse me. Oh, she's in the, okay, recognize Senator Kathleen Taylor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I want to echo the good carrier of Senate Bill 762 and urge your support for this common sense legislation. If we as a body share the common goal of wanting to end sexual assault and hold perpetrators accountable, we must work to find ways to remove barriers to reporting those crimes. Experts know alcohol to be the most common drug used when perpetrating sexual assault, and no matter your state of sobriety or inebriation, being assaulted is never deserved or okay. By ensuring that a survivor of this terrible crime knows that they should he or she report the crime, they will not inadvertently get themselves in trouble for having consumed or been in possession of alcohol. We will help to bring more young people forward so they can access the care and support they need. We are also more likely to have the opportunity to hold the perpetrator accountable and acknowledge that this crime is unacceptable. Thank you, colleagues. I urge your support for Senate Bill 762.
Recognize Senator Kim Thatcher, please.
Thank you. I just want to restate what the carrier was saying, that this is a matter of priorities. There is some concern that we're going to be letting minors in possession off the hook. Well, we might be in this case, in that the reason is for a higher purpose, and that is to hold perpetrators, assaulters, rapists accountable. Those are the people that need to be gone after, not when compared to minors in possession. And this is clearly a matter of priorities, and I totally support this bill and hope that you join me in voting yes.
Further discussion? Your closing, Senator Nelson. Question on rise bound 30 and final pass. Senate Bill 762A. Those opinion bills to pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Riley? Roeblen? Steiner Hayward? Taylor? Taylor? Thatcher? Thompson? Winters? Barrett Sugar? Byer? Boquist? Burdick? DeBoer? Dembro? Devlin? Ferrioli? Ferrioli? Frederick? Gelser? Gerard? Hansel? Hass? Johnson? Knope? Cruz? Linthicum? Manning? Monis Anderson? Monroe? Olson? Prozonsky? President Courtney? Excused. Barrett Sugar? 29 aye votes.
The Senate Bill 762A, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Recognize Senator Jenny Burdick, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that final consideration of SB 984 and SB 1040 be made special orders of business immediately.
Senator Jenny Burdick has moved that the final consideration of SB 984 and Senate Bill 1040 be made special orders of business immediately. To your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a good time to consider these bills.
Is there any discussion of the motion? If there's no discussion, the question is on making Senate Bill 984 and Senate Bill 1040 a special order of business immediately. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And those opposed, no. The motion has carried. We will now proceed to the special order of business. The clerk will please read the bill.
Senate Bill 984, relating to calculation of overtime for employee who exceeds maximum allowable hours during a work week.
Recognize Senator Tim Knope.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased to carry Senate Bill 984A on the floor today. Senate Bill 984A is a consensus bill agreed to by business and labor that creates protections for workers while simultaneously ensuring that the employer concerns, which are the impetus for the bill, are wholly addressed. Thanks to Chair Taylor and the Senate leadership for working to bring you a bipartisan bill that helps Oregonians. A companion bill will be coming over from the House side with the remaining elements of the package. Senate Bill 984 addresses daily and weekly overtime for manufacturing employees by coordinating two statutes that have long needed to work together. For many decades, Oregon law has required employers to pay time and a half overtime pay for hours worked over 40 hours in a single week. For even longer, Oregon law has required manufacturing employers to pay time and a half overtime pay for hours worked over 10 hours in a single day. It's in situations where an employee is owed both daily and weekly overtime that Senate Bill 984A's necessary clarifications come into play. Senate Bill 984A merely codifies in statute what most manufacturing employers have been instructed to do for decades, and that is to pay whichever of the two overtime calculations, either daily or weekly, is the higher amount. In the hearing on Senate Bill 984A, we also heard from employees who have been required to work more hours every day than the law allows, and from advocates that are concerned about overwork in this industry. Senate Bill 984A
Senate Bill 94A and the agreement around it go further than just clarifying overtime pay requirements. The bill now provides stronger penalties against employers who are illegally making their employees work more than the maximum daily and weekly hours. You will also see in the next few weeks a companion bill from the House which will include a right to rest of 10 hours in between shifts of 8 hours or more for manufacturing employees, except in the cases where employees are required to work additional hours because of power outage, major equipment breakdown, or severe weather issues that disrupt business operations, or where there's an emergency where life and property are in imminent danger. This companion bill will also apply a new weekly max for general manufacturing employees of 55 hours unless an employee requests or consents up to 60 hours. In such cases, the employer may not require or allow the employee to work more hours than 60 in a work week. Finally, the companion bill will prohibit retaliation against the employee for provisions in the statute. The committee and its members, along with Business and Labor, worked very hard, and this bill came out of the Senate Workforce Committee on a unanimous vote, and I urge your support.
Discussion of the measure, please. Senator Lori Montes Anderson.
Thank you. I do want to commend our chair of our committee that got people together to come out with a consensus product. This bill is very important to microchip, an industry in my district. They have 4 12-hour day shifts, 4-hour a week shifts, and then 3 12-hour a day shifts. And so this will really help them. A very good company, and I urge you aye a vote.
Recognize Senator Bill Hansel, please.
Mr. President, I serve on that committee, and I also want to express my appreciation on the floor for the leadership of our chair, Senator Kathleen Taylor. It has been a consensus building, and where we started at the start and where we are now is a great work of legislation, and I urge an aye vote.
Further discussion? Senator Knope, your closing. Question now arises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 984A. Those opinion bills shall pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Roebelin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Barrett Sugar, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Girard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Montes Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Brzezinski, Riley, President Courtney.
Yes.
Excused. Barrett Sugar, 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 984A having received a constitutional majority declared passed. Clerk reads the bill.
Senate Bill 1040 relating to union security agreements and declaring an emergency.
Recognize Senator Kathleen Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 1040 comes to you from the Senate Committee on Workforce. As background, the National Labor Relations Act was enacted in 1935, and it is the primary federal law governing union and employer relations in the private sector. That law guarantees employees can unionize and negotiate compensation and workplace conditions with their employers. It also prohibits threatening job loss or retaliating against employees who join or support a union. Federal law also prohibits the refusal to process grievances of employees who criticize the union or do not join, as well as those who refuse to support the union. The federal law does allow employers and unions to reach union security agreements. These agreements require all employees in a bargaining unit to become union members and pay dues. When an employee objects to joining the union, their membership continues, but they only pay dues directly to their own representation. The Taft-Hartley Act, which was enacted in 1947, gave states the authority to ban union security agreements. Currently, Oregon allows employers and unions to enter these agreements. And Senate Bill 1040 removes a loophole that may allow local governments to ban these agreements in certain parts of the state. We know that state and local policies to ban union security agreements, as so-called right-to-work states, are bad for workers. Where these union security agreements are banned, workers have lower annual salaries and experience higher poverty rates. When workers benefit from the rights of unions to organize and enter agreements which protect employees, workers and their families fare better. Colleagues, it is important that we pass Senate Bill 1040 today, and thank you for your time. I urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Discussion of the measure. Senator Olson, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the carrier entertain a question?
Will the carrier yield, please?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. In section 1, line 4, it says, to encourage labor peace. I was wondering, where have we had labor war in our state?
Sorry, I don't know that I'm not sure what the good carrier, I'm sorry, I mean the good representative from, that's what you're asking me.
To quote the line, it says, to encourage labor peace, and I was just wondering where we've had this state of war between labor and management.
I mean, I think it's more of a term of art. I have counsel here if there's additional clarification. I think it's just a term of art. I don't really know. I think this is just clarifying the statement. Is there something else that we could add?
No, thank you. To the bill, Mr. President.
To the bill.
Colleagues, this is basically, when you read it, an attempt to thwart local opportunity to have a right to work jurisdiction. Now, when one looks at our state and one looks at the major unions we have in our state, and all unions are really appropriate and good, I don't understand the necessity or the fear that we cannot allow my town of Canby to declare a right to work. We're taking away their local option, their home rule, which we've given them. Therefore, I will be a no on this bill.
Recognize Senator Lori Monis Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I've always supported unions, and I take it very, very personally. Being a single mom with 2 kids and having to make sure that I had a living wage, my union was there for me and has always worked to make sure that we had the opportunity to have fair wage, benefits, retirement. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and that is why I'm voting for this bill. Thank you.
Senator Taylor, your closing. Question now rises on third reading and final pass. Senate Bill 1040. Those opinion your bills pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Barrett Sugar, Byer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, President Courtney. Excused, Barrett Sugar, voting no. Boquist, DeBoer, Ferrioli, Gerard, Hansel, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Olson, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, 17 aye votes.
Bill 1040 having received a constitutional majority is declared passed. Senator Tim Knope, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vote explanation.
Please file your vote explanation.
Thank you, Mr. President. My no vote goes beyond the fact that I support employee choice. And really it has to do with balance. And 1040 is a preemption. And when essentially labor and some business that supports labor came in and testified on this bill, I actually think they made the case for preemption as it relates to labor issues. However, all we have on the floor today is union preemption. We don't have preemption for business on wages, benefits, and scheduling. And so therefore, I could not vote for this bill because I don't believe we have balance, and I think balance is what's needed in this particular area of debate that we have. And so if you're making the case for preemption for unions, I think we need to make preemption as well permanent for employees and employers on the other side, so that when these debates happen, they happen at the state level. So consider my no vote a courtesy no.
Action on executive appointments that require Senate confirmation. Introduction and first reading of the Senate measures. Second reading of Senate measures.
Senate Bill 5511, relating to financial administration of the Construction Contractors Board, declare emergency. Senate Bill 5513, relating to financial administration of specified boards, declare emergency. Senate Bill 59, relating to long-term care ombudsman, declare emergency. Senate Bill 81, relating to health care for veterans. Senate Bill 84, relating to surcharge collected for purpose of funding telecommunications programs. Senate Bill 88, relating to electronic government portals. Senate Bill 208, relating to student participation in interscholastic activities. Senate Bill 241, relating to children of incarcerated parents. Senate Bill 253, relating to student loan disclosure. Senate Bill 298, relating to discretion of Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor and Industries to pursue matters on behalf of certain complaints and declaring an emergency. Senate Bill 317, relating to public meetings. Senate Bill 488, relating to towing. Senate Bill 507, relating to applications to set aside convictions. Senate Bill 833, relating to suicide. Senate Bill 850, relating to resilience planning, declare emergency. Senate Bill 1000, relating to civil defense forces. Senate Bill 1055, relating to family law proceedings involved deploying parents in the military service.
These will be passed to the calendar. We're now on the third reading of Senate measures. Would the clerk please read the bill?
Senate Bill 48, relating to continuing education for professionals and declaring emergency.
Recognize Senator Lori Monis Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 48A passed out of the Senate Human Services Committee on a unanimous vote. Oregon has one of the highest suicide rates in the country. Over 760 people died from suicide in 2015, and suicide is the second leading cause of death for Oregonians under the age of 35. In 2015, around 2,000 people were hospitalized for suicide-associated behavior. A variety of medical and non-medical professionals come into contact with people at risk of suicide, and often there is no professional requirement to ensure suicide prevention training is up to date. There is currently little data on suicide prevention training completion in a variety of medical and non-medical professions. What Senate Bill 48A does is it requires certain medical and non-medical professional regulatory boards to require practitioners to report completion of any Oregon Health Authority approved suicide prevention trainings upon reauthorization to practice. Professional regulatory boards are required to report this data to Oregon Health Authority, and which OHA then will include in a report to the legislature each biennium. The bill also requires the Oregon Health Authority to develop a list of approved suicide prevention training. There is an emergency clause on this bill that will help facilitate boards and Oregon Health Authority to begin implementation of the bill ahead of the operative date. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion. Your closing. Question now upon third reading final passage Senate Bill 48A. Those pending bills pass say aye. Those opposed no. Clerk please call the roll.
Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Bertschiger, Byer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Prozonsky, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, President Courtney, excused, Bertschiger, 29 aye votes.
Bill 48A having received constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk reads the bill.
Senate Bill 99, relating to the Director of the State Department of Energy.
Recognize Senator Biden Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very simple bill, and it comes to you with the unanimous support of your Business and Transportation Committee. It simply states that the Director of the State Department of Energy shall be subject to Senate confirmation. I urge your aye vote.
Senator Monroe, your closing. Question now rise upon third reading final passage Senate Bill 99. Those pending bills pass say aye. Those opposed no. Clerk please call the roll.
Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Bertschiger, Byer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, President Courtney. Excused. Bear Sugar, 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 99, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk reads bill.
Senate Bill 117, relating to towing.
Recognize Senator Chuck Riley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 117A comes to you from your Judiciary Committee. This is a bill that I've been working on for probably 12 years now, trying to get this right. This particular version corrects a problem where towers come and tow a vehicle that is sometimes, according to the signs there, properly parked, but the owner of the parking space does not necessarily agree that that vehicle should be towed. An example is an apartment building. We had a couple who lived there, and they're assigned a parking space. The husband went to work that day, and his wife was needed to go to the hospital. She was pregnant. Her mother came over to assist her, to take her to the hospital, parked in their assigned parking space, and went in to help her daughter get her things together to go to the hospital. When they came out, the car was gone. These things should never happen. That parking space belongs to that apartment, and they should have the right to determine who parks in their parking space and who gets towed. This will correct that by requiring the someone who's responsible for that parking space to be present and sign that they called and authorized the tow. I want to add that most towing companies are very responsible. There are a few companies that aren't terribly responsible and actually tow vehicles based on almost nothing. It also requires, and the current law requires that they take a photograph, and that's been in the law for several years. Unfortunately, when we wrote that bill back in 2007, we didn't require that they show it to anybody. And they have been refusing to show the photograph, which shows why someone is illegally parked. This bill will also require them to show that photograph. I urge and I vote. Thank you very much.
Under discussion, recognize Senator Kim Thatcher.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 days in a row, I'm going to be changing my vote. It was simply because there were so many amendments posted when I was looking at the bill, and then finally at the night before the committee hearing, the -4s were posted. And now that I'm reading the A engrossed version of it, they seem like very reasonable changes, and I will be supporting the bill. Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Riley, your closing. Of course, now rise upon third reading and final pass. Senate Bill 117A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared. Senate Bill 117. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thompson, Winters, Fairchiger, Byer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monos Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, President Courtney. Excused. Bear Sugar, 29 aye votes.
Bill 117A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk reads bill.
Senate Bill 144, relating to archaeological objects.
Recognize Senator Ted Ferrioli.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of Oregon's 9 federally recognized treaty tribes have been concerned for decades about the looting of funerary objects and artifacts from archaeological sites that exist either on public lands or which are exposed by changes in water levels at lakes on federal lands or even on their own tribal lands, certainly also on the ceded lands, which encompass most of Oregon. They have brought these concerns to the attention of district attorneys in all 36 counties, and the result has been an increasing awareness of these issues as problematic for the tribes. Certainly we would feel very put upon if our objects in connection with the honoring of our relatives was being looted or somehow destroyed. A problem has been discovered in the attempt to get prosecution of these issues, and that is there's been some ambiguity in the law about what constitutes an artifact, and there's also been the reluctance of some prosecutors to bring cases against constituents in their communities. The solution to the problem is the law that you see before you. Senate Bill 144 proposes that if prosecutors decline to indict after having an investigation conducted by local law enforcement and being presented with that evidence, that they will have to report the reason for declining. And it could be a technical reason, it could be a weakness in the case, it could be a number of issues, it could even be prosecutorial discretion, which this bill does not destroy. But they would have to report to the Commission on Indian Services the reason they declined to prosecute, and also to provide that information to the State Attorney General. And the State Attorney General could, in certain instances where the Attorney General believes that that is an improper decision not to prosecute, the State Attorney General could in fact take up that prosecution criminally or civilly. Colleagues, there's an exemption in the current law for archaeological objects that are discovered unintentionally on public lands. That exemption has been used as a defense for looting Indian burial mounds and for picking up artifacts. The bill removes the exemption. So if archaeological objects are discovered intentionally or unintentionally, they must remain in place. Senate Bill 144 also ensures the return of cultural resources to tribes by requiring law enforcement agents to notify the Legislative Assembly on Indian Services when these contraband items are seized. Occasionally, colleagues, objects that are clearly intended to be honor objects buried with the remains of deceased members of the tribe have been collected, an investigation conducted, and the evidence presented to the prosecutor, for whatever reason, declines, and instead of returning the artifact to the tribe, the artifact is given back to the person that collected it in the first place. The Senate Bill 144 requires these artifacts to be repatriated to the tribes where they belong. Also, the bill requires the Legislative Commission on Indian Services to work to identify and notify the appropriate tribe so those items can be properly and swiftly returned. The -3 amendments were incorporated into the bill, and those amendments allow the Department of Justice to criminally prosecute cases when the county district attorney is unwilling or unable to prosecute or chooses not to prosecute. Colleagues, this puts a backstop to protect tribal interests in these cases. I believe that district attorneys will be much more diligent in pursuing these cases as a result. If the district attorney decides not to prosecute due to any reason other than insufficient admissible evidence, they would have 30 days to notify the Attorney General, and in these cases, the AG may prosecute if that person decides to do so. The Department of Justice clearly has greater resources and expertise in order to prosecute, and in some instances I expect that local prosecutors will be happy to defer these cases to the AG. Colleagues, this bill is supported by the 9 treaty tribes. It has been presented and vetted and worked by the District Attorneys Association, the Sheriff's Association, and other law enforcement personnel. They are neutral on the bill. I believe it's time for us to make a very strong statement about protecting cultural artifacts for Oregon's 9 treaty tribes, and I urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion. Senator Ferrioli, closing remarks. Question now rises upon third reading and final pass. Senate Bill 144A. Those opinion bills shall pass. Will say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Winters, Bertschiger, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, President Courtney. Excused. Bertschiger, 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 144A have received the constitutional majority, declared passed. Clerk reads bill.
Senate Bill 225 relating to liability for campaign finance violations and prescribing effective date.
Recognize Senator Brian Boquist.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 225 comes from your Rules Committee. In the last full session, in the last day of that full session, in the last bill of that full session, I carried the minority report for House Bill 2176, which of course did not make it out. The majority report went back to committee. One of the technical issues inside of that report, that minority report, and the main bill at that time was treasurer liability. If you're not familiar under the campaign finance situation under ORSTAR and in elections, candidates are responsible for the actions of their committees. However, due to an error previously in the law, the treasurer or anyone was sort of deleted from being responsible for a political committee and a petition committee. With the advent of professional treasurers managing the treasuries of many political and petition committees, we've come back with this particular bill. What it allows is the designated treasurer of a political or petition committee to either accept themselves at the liability for the financial transactions of that committee, or if they are a professional staff member of a commercial enterprise that is hired to do treasurer works, can in fact designate another individual, i.e. one of the petitioners most likely, or one of the directors of the political action committee, to be liable for the financial transactions of that committee. It is sort of a technical fix and reinstatement of an old law with a little clarification. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion. Senator Boquist, your closing.
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, now rise upon third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 225A. Have received. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Please call the roll.
Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Gerard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Bertschiger, President Courtney. Excused. Bertschiger, 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 225A have received the constitutional majority, declared pass. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 263 relating to abbreviated school days and declaring emergency.
Recognize Senator Sarah Gelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we bring you Senate Bill 263 from the Senate Human Services Committee. There has been a problem in recent years of students being put on shortened school days in their public school programs. In some cases, receiving as little as an hour of instruction a day or 3 hours of instruction a week, not just for a week or 2 weeks or 6 months or a term, but for years and years at a time. In the committee, we heard testimony about children who were forced into foster care because of this situation, and a lot of questions about how this was happening and how the rights of the children were protected, as we know that our compulsory school attendance law guarantees every child in Oregon the right to access the same number of instructional hours on a year-to-year basis. I was very happy to see the advocates and school representatives come together to work out the amendments to Senate Bill 263 to be something in the end that had no opposition. Under Senate Bill 263A, a student could only be put on a shortened school day if that was a decision that was come to through a normal suspension or expulsion process, or was a decision that was made by an IEP team. That IEP team meeting would have to be able to document that it had meaningful participation from the parents, and parents would need to be provided with written information that ensured that that family was aware that the child, under existing state law, has the right to access the same number of instructional hours as all other students in the district. And then the parent would have the right to request that that decision to shorten the school day be revisited at a later date. Colleagues, you can't learn if you're not at school, and this bill will help us to ensure that kids are in school where they can learn, except for in very narrow circumstances where due process has applied and there is the opportunity to ensure that it is the right decision for the right amount of time and is based on the needs of the child and not the convenience of the school district. I urge your aye vote.
Discussion. Senator Betsy Johnson, please.
Thank you. Will the carrier yield to a question?
Will the carrier yield?
Yes, I will.
The carrier will.
Thank you. In your carry of this bill, you indicated that school advocates had agreed and that this was a compromise bill. Could you describe who was in the room when that agreement was reached? My schools have expressed concerns about this bill as yet another unfunded mandate on schools at a time when school funding remains precarious.
Thank you for that question. The Oregon School Boards Association and the Coalition of School Administrators, OSBA and COSA, and COSA came and testified in the public hearing as to their support of the bill.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Gelser, you're closing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my thanks to the good senator for raising a point that I meant to add, which is the question about the unfunded mandate. The reason that this is not an unfunded mandate is that the whole idea of public school is that every child in the state of Oregon has the right to attend a public school. We don't get to pick and choose. You are eligible to attend public school and you are not eligible to attend public school. In checking with the Legislative Council and working on this bill, we were able to get that confirmation that every single student is in fact entitled to receive and have access to a full school day and a full school year. This bill simply says if that is going to change, it has to go through a process that frankly is already established by law, and that we cannot short circuit that process, so that a child's right to attend school, just as we enforce that compulsory attendance law, the compulsory ability to attend school also attaches to the child. It's an important bill, and I urge your aye vote.
Question now rise upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 263A. Those opinion bills shall pass. Say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Girard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monis Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Prozonsky, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Barrett Sugar, Byer, President Courtney. Not answering. Boquist. Excused. Barrett Sugar. 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 263A have received the constitutional majorities declared passed. Clerk reads the bill.
Senate Bill 299 relating to sick leave and declaring emergency.
Recognize Senator Bill Hansel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 299A comes to you from your Senate Committee on Workforce on a unanimous do-pass recommendation. After the 2015 legislative session, Senate Bill 454, the Oregon Sick Time Law, was implemented. Shortly after implementation, it became apparent that some aspects of the bill needed clarification. Regulatory rulemakers have adopted interpretations that were not only unfavorable to many small businesses, but also for some of us against legislative intent. During the interim and the first half of the current session, industry and labor began working together to find solutions. Senate Bill 299A attempts to solve these issues. Senate Bill 299A, after much negotiations with labor and industry, clarifies 4 areas of the statute. Number 1, the original sick leave bill did not address farmers market within the city of Portland. Senate Bill 299A clarifies this issue. Number 2, the bill also attempts to address the employee count in regards to sick leave. Senate Bill 454, through legislative intent, as well as the original bill, exempted parents, spouses, children of employees from the employee's threshold for Oregon sick time. However, when Boley went to administrative rules, the language wasn't as clear as it needed to be. Senate Bill 299A clarifies further in statute that family members and business owners are exempt from the employment count for paid sick time. Labor and industry representatives negotiated this point to require the business owner to have a substantial ownership interest. Number 3, interpretations of Senate Bill 454 require farmers and other businesses to pay by the piece to calculate the regular rate of pay for employees who take paid sick leave. For many farms, this interpretation makes workforce during harvest time very uncertain. This bill, Senate Bill 299A, realigns the implementation with legislative intent. Employees must have hourly, weekly, or monthly rate of pay. If they do not, then piece rate employees can be paid the state's minimum wage when they take sick leave. And finally, Senate Bill 299A clarifies that only the first 40 hours of paid time off policy are covered by the specific protections of the Oregon sick time law. This is the original intent of the 2015 legislation. Senate Bill 299A is a negotiated agreement between labor, business community, the farming community, contractors, and trucking associations. Boley worked in good faith to make these necessary changes to Senate Bill 299 to ensure all issues were addressed. I urge you to vote yes on Senate Bill 298, which fixes issues Senate Bill 454 created when it became fully operational due to different interpretations of legislative intent. Thank you, Mr. President, and again, I urge an aye vote.
Discussion? Senator Hansel, your closing. Question now rises upon 30 and final pass Senate Bill 2998. Those opinion bills pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Burdick. DeBoer. Dembro. Devlin. Ferrioli. Frederick. Gelser. Girard. Hansel. Hass. Johnson. Knope. Cruz. Linthicum. Manning. Modis Anderson. Monroe. Olson. Brzezinski. Riley. Roblin. Steiner Hayward. Taylor. Thatcher. Thompson. Winters. Bairdssugar. Beyer. Boquist. President Courtney?
Yes.
Excused. Bairdssugar. 29 aye votes.
The Senate Bill 299A have received a constitutional majority declared passed. Clerk reads the bill.
Senate Bill 339, relating to small-scale renewable energy projects and declaring emergency.
Recognize Senator Chuck Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Business and Labor Committee recommends to you Senate Bill 339A to clarify the small-scale renewable requirement passed back in 2016. As amended, this bill brings important clarification to Oregon's small-scale renewable requirements by ensuring that projects are in fact renewable or eligible under Oregon's RPS. This is a highly important step to continue to support Oregon's small-scale community renewable projects. It simply says, Mr. President, that if the energy in a facility comes from biomass that also generates heat called cogeneration, that the first 20 megawatts of the total capacity of that facility may be used to comply with the 8% requirement. I recommend these important changes to you and ask for your support. Senate Bill 339A. Thank you, Mr. President.
Under discussion, recognize Senator Betsy Johnson.
Thank you. Question of the carrier.
The carrier, you.
Yeah, I might defer to somebody else, but sure.
Carrier will yield.
What's the emergency characterized by this bill? Why it has an emergency clause?
I've asked myself that same question over and over and over. And it's probably the same answer that I get.
To the bill?
To the bill.
Colleagues, the abuse of the emergency clause appears to be back in full force with today's agenda. At one point, it had subsided. It seems to be rearing its ugly head again based on the inability of the carrier to describe the emergency. I'm a no.
Senator Liebeyer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can address the emergency clause. The issue is that this really clarifies the law that we passed. As the carrier said 2 years ago, there was confusion. Without acting on it quickly, we limit a number of businesses' ability to qualify that are sort of in midstream, and it's an economic harm to them if they can't.
Thank you. Senator Thompson, your closing. Question now rides upon third reading and final passage, Senate Bill 339A. Those opinion bills pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Girard, Hansel, Haas, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monas Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Prozonsky, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Baird-Sugar, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, President Courtney. Excuse, Baird-Sugar, voting no. Ferrioli. Voting no. Ferrioli, Girard, Johnson, Cruz, Linthicum, Olson, Thatcher, Winters. 21 aye votes.
Senate Bill 339A, having received the constitutional majority, is declared passed. Clerk reads bill.
Senate Bill 378, limiting charitable checkoffs and prescribing effective date.
Recognize Senator Bill Hansel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to urge my colleagues to vote in favor of Senate Bill 378, the bill that all 30 senators have signed on to as sponsors. Currently, when Oregon taxpayers file their taxes, they may check a box authorizing a donation to a charitable organization listed on the tax checkoff form. Under ORS 305-720, in order for a charitable organization to be eligible to receive such a contribution, it must demonstrate that it is designated as a 501c3 under the Internal Revenue Code, collect 10,000 or more signatures from registered Oregon voters, and demonstrate that it has a gross income of at least $1 million for the year prior to application. Several entities are exempt from the $1 million income requirement, including the Oregon Veterans Home, the Non-Game Wildlife Fund, Alzheimer's Disease Research Fund, and others such as that. Senate Bill 378 will add the Oregon Volunteer Firefighters Association to the list of entities that are exempt from meeting the $1 million income requirement. It will not automatically add the association to the checkoff list and will require the 10,000 signatures. Many rural communities rely on the services provided by volunteer firefighters. These volunteer firefighters are the first responder in rural communities. They receive the same training experience as paid firefighters do for the most part. But volunteer firefighters many times have a more difficult time paying for the equipment or the mandatory training the state requires of firefighters. Volunteer firefighters are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year. If approved, contributions to the Oregon Volunteer Firefighters Association will help fund training opportunities and hardship benefits for Oregon's 8,700 volunteer firefighters. During these tough economic times, there's a segment of our population who are willing to step up and provide a much-needed public service at no cost to the taxpayer, and often at their own expense, both in money and time away from their families for training and emergency response calls. Representative Boone on the other side has introduced this bill several times. Representative Boone's husband was the chief volunteer firefighter in rural Clatsop County. He oversaw a stretch of Highway 26. Representative Boone herself served as a volunteer firefighter for about 16 years. We are all aware of the hardships Representative Boone and her husband are experiencing. I believe we have an opportunity to honor the Boones by passing this bill. She has been championed for over 10 years. I urge your support of Senate Bill 378.
Senator Thompson, please.
Potential conflict of interest, Mr. President. I'm a 35-year volunteer fireman. Thank you.
Well, please let the record show that you have potentially filed your conflict of interest. Further discussion? Senator Hansel, your closing. Question on Vice President, third reading and final passage of the Senate Bill 378. Those opinion bills pass. Say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk will call the roll.
Dembro, Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Girard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monos Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Baird-Sugar, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, President Courtney.
Yes.
Excused. Baird-Sugar, 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 378 having received custom majority is declared passed. Clerk reads the bill.
Senate Bill 497, relating to orders setting aside arrest records.
Floyd Przonski, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senate Bill 497A came out of your Judiciary Committee on a 5-0 vote. Colleagues, what this bill is going to do is going to provide that a person may file a motion to set aside a record of a criminal citation or criminal charge in addition to, record of arrest. This will provide that a certain circumstances that prior conviction or criminal citations and criminal charges within a specific time period disqualifies the person from following the motion for setting aside this record. This is, in effect, an opportunity to allow for those individuals to be able to make certain that their record is completely clean when they're trying to expunge, let's say, a conviction. That sometimes the arrest also runs independent, and that will stay on their record, and this will give them the process to be able to expunge the record completely. Thank you, Mr. President.
Discussion. Senator Przonski, your closing. Question now rises upon third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 497A. Those opinion bills pass. Say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Devlin, Ferrioli, Frederick, Gelser, Girard, Hansel, Hass, Johnson, Knope, Cruz, Linthicum, Manning, Monos Anderson, Monroe, Olson, Przonski, Riley, Roblin, Steiner Hayward, Taylor, Thatcher, Thompson, Winters, Baird-Sugar, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, President Courtney. Excused. Baird-Sugar, 29 aye votes.
Bill 497A having received constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk reads the bill.
Senate Bill 795 relating to crime victims.
Recognize Senator Lori Monos Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, sexual assault cases are one of the most emotional and physically jarring experiences a person can go through. Senate Bill 795 will require greater support be provided to those survivors. It will require that law enforcement or sexual assault medical assessment providers contact a victim advocate and make reasonable efforts to ensure the advocate is available to the survivor at the medical facility where the assessment was conducted. Sexual assault survivors are suffering so much trauma that providing an advocate to help them navigate the legal and law enforcement process during these horrific times is simply the right thing to do. Too many victims find these cases so gut-wrenching and difficult to participate in that they walk away, and justice sometimes is never served for their attackers. This will give these survivors the support to help them navigate the legal process. Current Oregon law requires hospitals and other medical service providers to adopt policies for treating or referring acute sexual assault patients when those policies are not otherwise required by law. If these facilities perform sexual assault medical assessments to collect evidence, they are required to adopt specific guidelines, employ or contract a qualified examiner for adult victims, and notify a law enforcement agency within 7 days after collecting a sexual assault forensics evidence kit. I urge an aye vote.
Senator Betsy Johnson, please.
Would the carrier yield to a question?
Would the carrier yield?
Yes.
I couldn't tell from your explanation of the bill. When time is of the essence in the collection of evidence, is anything in this bill, could it possibly delay the collection of evidence so that perpetrators, guilty persons, could be brought to justice?
Not that I'm aware of, but would counsel? No. Not that I am aware of, Senator.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Monahan Anderson, your closing. Motion to revise upon third reading and final passage Senate Bill 795A. Those opinion bills to pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Ferrioli. Frederick. Gelser. Girard. Hansel. Hass. Johnson. Knope. Cruz. Linthicum. Manning. Monahan Anderson. Monroe. Olson. Przonski. Riley. Roblin. Steiner Hayward. Taylor. Thatcher. Thompson. Winters. Barrett Sugar. Byer. Boquist. Burdick. DeBoer. Dembro. Devlin. President Courtney.
Yes.
Excused. Barrett Sugar. 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 795A received constitutional majority is declared passed. Clerk reads bill.
Senate Bill 819, relating to critical incident response teams and declaring emergency.
Recognize Senator Sarah Gelser, please.
Mr. President, colleagues, when there's a child fatality related to child abuse or neglect, and that child has been in contact with the agency in the prior year, either because they were the subject of a child abuse assessment or they were in foster care, the department is required to convene something that's called a critical incident response team. This is not a team that investigates what led to that death, but it is a team that goes to look at what can we learn from this totality of circumstances. Are there issues with actual policy or the implementation of policy that could be changed to prevent such tragedy in the future? Senate Bill 819 refines that process in a couple of ways. The first is that current law allows both mandatory certs and discretionary certs. And the mandatory certs are only when an assessment has actually been done of a child. Someone calls in the child abuse hotline, and at that time somebody goes out and they investigate the abuse. It's unfounded, and then within 12 months the child has died as a result of abuse. What this bill adds in are the cases where somebody has called into the child abuse hotline, but nobody has gone out to investigate that allegation of abuse in the prior 12 months. Or when the child that has died has been in a household where there was an assessment done in the prior 12 months, but it was actually their sibling that was the subject of the abuse assessment. The department has been doing some of these as discretionary certs, but they're very important because as we read through the certs over the last 10 years, we've learned that one of the biggest gaps that's led to child fatality are problems with our child abuse investigations and with our screenings. So we want to be able to go back and look at if a child had had a dozen closed at screening abuse reports in the year prior to their death. We want to better understand why did that happen and why did we not deliver help to this child before that child died. The other thing that the bill does is clarify in statute the expectation of these reports as a public record. Since Clyde Psyche has come as the director of the department, he has changed the way that these reports are being delivered. If you go and you read a cert that has been published over the last 12 months, they are much more descriptive. They have concrete outcomes and plans and check-in points where we know that we are not only learning what the gap was in policy or practice, but how that is going to be resolved. And I would really give Clyde credit. He did a discretionary cert that was called GJ earlier this year, and through that they immediately, even before the cert was done, issued a system-wide policy change that ensured that a child would be seen by a nurse every time they moved in a foster care position. In this case, it was a 16-year-old that died of constipation while in foster care. So we want to make sure that regardless of who the director of the Department of Human Services is, that we have this accountability tool, that we are able to look back and learn from these tragedies. Colleagues, Senate Bill 819 is an important bill. It comes to you unanimously from our committee, and I urge your aye vote.
Senator Betsy Johnson.
Thank you. Will the carrier yield to a question?
Will the carrier yield?
Yes.
Last week, colleagues, we heard about a DHS committee that dealt with sensitive child welfare matters. They had not met for 2 years. If there was ever an agency that exhibited issues with child welfare, I would submit to you it's DHS. So my question of the carrier is, what assurance do you have that this agency will actually discharge the responsibilities articulated in this bill when their previous sensitive committee didn't meet?
Thank you for that question, good Senator, and there are a couple of answers to it. First, this is a different process than the Sensitive Review Committee. The Sensitive Review Committee may meet, and I know some of us have met on those. I've been on one that involved a child reunited with somebody in Mexico over the objections of family that was in the United States. These critical incident review teams are mandatory when there is a child fatality, and these have occurred because they are mandated by law. One of the reasons it's so important to put these provisions into statute, however, is that we passed the law that required the mandatory certs in 2007, and our committee was surprised to learn in December of 2016 that in that 10 years the department had never adopted the rules necessary to be able to shape these. So this bill provides that structure, and it does make it statutorily mandatory that they occur, and they have occurred. We've seen 4 or 5 posted in just the last few months.
Will the carrier yield to another question?
Would the carrier yield to another question?
Yes.
You're making my point. When you said they had not instituted the rules in 10 years, and we have had child fatalities, what will be the oversight process to assure that they're carrying through on this legislation?
So thank you again, Senator, for the good question. Although they had not adopted the rule, they had a protocol, so they were still conducting these. The point of oversight are these reports. You can go and read these reports going back over 10 years, and you can see the difference in leadership in terms of the amount of detail that is provided in these. The reports that have come out of the department since about last fall have had sufficient detail to really hold the department accountable, to be able to go back and look at this is something that worked well, and this is a place that the department erred or simply was negligent. So this bill does not leave it up to rule. It puts it into statute, and because it's all publicly posted, we have the ability to look at it. The other thing that the bill does that addresses that is that it adds the ability to add public members to these CERT teams, so it is not just internal DHS staff that are doing these, but it allows for a legislator or a juvenile court judge, depending on the circumstance of the particular fatality.
To the bill. Colleagues, we're lucky that Senator Gelser is providing the level of aggressive advocacy that she is on behalf of children. Apropos the recent article in the Oregonian, would that there was as aggressive an advocate for seniors that DHS seems to have relegated to the dustbin. I'm going to support the bill, but it's a shame that the agency doesn't have the same level of oversight for seniors as they do for juveniles.
Question. Senator Gelser, you're closing. Question number by third reading, final pass Senate Bill 819A. Those opinion bills passed, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
Frederick? Gelser? Girard? Hansel? Hass? Johnson? Knope? Cruz? Linthicum? Manning? Monis Anderson? Monroe? Olson? Prozonsky? Riley? Roblin? Steiner Hayward? Taylor? Thatcher? Thompson? Winters? Bertschiger, Beyer, Boquist, Burdick, DeBoer, Dembro, Devlin, Barioli, President Courtney. Excused, Bertschiger, 29 aye votes.
Senate Bill 819A, Chief Constitutional General declared passed. I'll carry over the remainder of the third reading calendar until tomorrow's calendar. First reading of House measures.
House Concurrent Resolution 27, recognizing and honoring Corporal Jessica A. Ellis for her service to his country. House Concurrent Resolution 29, recognizing and honoring Lance Corporal Randy Lee Newman for his service to his country. House Bill 2039, relating to annexation. House Bill 2162, relating increasing apprentice utilization of public improvements for state contracting gain chiefs, starting effective date. House Bill 2567, relating to the requirement that certain employees provide notice before reduction in workforce. House Bill 2682, relating to highway speeds. House Bill 2785, relating to applicability of removal fill laws. House Bill 2838, relating to medical assistance. House Bill 2968, relating to brownfields and declare mercy. House Bill 2975, relating to vehicle dealers. House Bill 3060, relating to requiring countries for public procurements to have policies to prevent certain discriminatory conduct, starting effective date. House Bill 3158, relating to incentives for reporting wildlife law violations. House Bill 3181, relating to dental screenings, declaring emergency. House Bill 3305, relating to enforcing warranties for new vehicles and declaring emergency. House Bill 3353, relating to dental screenings, starting effective date. House Bill 3377, relating to Oregon Business Development Department, declaring emergency. House Bill 3389, relating to conduct of drivers near rail crossings. House Bill 3409, relating to exemptions to compulsory school attendance. House Bill 3439, relating to professional corporations.
These will be transmitted to the President's desk for referral. Second reading of House measure. Third reading of House measure. I will carry over the third reading of House measure until tomorrow's calendar. We're now under other business of the Senate. Recognize Senator Sarah Gelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to declare a potential conflict of interest on Senate Bill 225.
The senator would like unanimous consent to allow her to enter her potential conflict of interest on what is the bill? Senate Bill?
Senate Bill 225.
225. Are there any objections? What is your potential conflict of interest on Senate Bill 225?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 225 regulates campaign treasurers, and a member of my household has a company that on occasion does campaign treasury for compensation.
The potential conflict of interest is now on the record. Other business of the Senate? Announcements. Senator Jenny Burdick, are there any announcements? None. Senator Ted Ferrioli, any announcements? There are no announcements. If there are no announcements, well, I just want to say this. So tomorrow the calendar is big again. So we'll go into the noon hour again, which means we'll probably go into the noon hour again on Thursday. We do not meet on Fridays yet. I like to finish the calendar before the end of the week, so the next 2 noon hours could be full, if I may say so. Thank you for your patience. If there are no further announcements and without objection, the Senate will be adjourned until 11 a.m. Wednesday, April 26. 11 a.m. Wednesday, April 26. The Senate is now adjourned.